Ivy Nation Sports Talk is up and rolling on a Friday, and that can only mean one thing. It is all rapid fire. Along with Jesse Stiers, I'm Sean Stiers. Hope you're having a great day getting ready for what's hopefully a great weekend. Did the Cubs already play today?
They did not. Every MLB game starts at 6 p.m. or later. Tonight is that marquee matinee matchup, 6 p.m. or later. They did hit 3 home runs off of Paul Skeens yesterday, though. So
Saw that.
Very happy about that.
Yep.
They're playing in Wrigley Field North this evening.
I think that was basically the worst start of Paul Skeens' career, wasn't it?
He did not do well. That is correct. He only gave up 1 home run this season so far, and the Cubs tagged him for 3 in 1 inning and got him out of there.
You're wearing all your Cubs gear, so I figured we might as well just make it a third straight week that we start with some kind of Cubs content at the top of the show, since everybody eats up the Cubs, even though Vince is not here today. Maybe that'll make for a more focused show today. I don't know.
Who needs Vince?
Smash the like button if you would as we get started today. We've got a lot to roll into, and a lot of it kind of fell in the old lap here today. It was interesting because yesterday Salty asked us a question about Jadon Blair and Dallas Golden. And so, I kind of put on the thinking cap a little bit more on Dallas Golden. And he's an incoming freshman. He's not an early enrollee. He's going to get here in June, with the rest of the freshmen who didn't enroll early. And when he reports, that'll be for summer school and summer workouts and all that kind of stuff. But Dallas Golden plans to play both cornerback and wide receiver for the Fighting Irish. That's like when he was being recruited, that is something that they talked about. So let's just start with this. Scale of 1 to 10. How exciting is the idea of a guy like Dallas Golden playing both ways for Notre Dame, Jess?
Yeah, I think this is a 10 out of 10 for me. When you have a guy who could potentially be, a game changer on both sides of the ball, why not utilize him? I think the biggest thing that comes to mind when you talk about a guy who's playing 2 ways is does he have the stamina and the endurance, right? Does he ever get fatigued? And again, can he be, a game changer on both sides? Like, you don't want someone who's, is going 75% naturally just because they're fatigued from playing the other side of the ball, when someone could be in there going 100%. So I think it's really exciting, but I'm curious to see how effective he can truly be on both sides of the ball.
I mean, I think that's going to be the question. It's a 10 out of 10 for me as well. And I think that the level of excitement is just higher now because of the fact that we just saw the best case scenario, best case example of this, of how this can work with Travis Hunter at Colorado. Like he plays both ways for 2 years at Colorado after playing both ways at Jackson State for a year, following Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, whatever you want to call him, off to Colorado. So he wins a Heisman Trophy, and then Jacksonville trades up for him and grabs him at number 2 overall in the NFL draft last week. And, so like you can't get much better than that. The only thing that would have made it even better is if he would have gone number 1 overall. But, as for Dallas Golden, he played everywhere in high school. He ran for over 1,400 yards twice as a running back down there in Tampa, Florida. And he also played wide receiver, cornerback, safety, and even some wildcat quarterbacks. I mean, this guy has obviously demonstrated the fact that he can, he's a great enough athlete, he's already done a lot of things, kind of like Jack Kaiser, but, I think the athleticism level is even higher for a guy like Dallas Golden. We haven't seen this before, college football in general, like football in general, like the days of this went out, like 50, 60 years ago when guys used to play 2 ways all the time. So to me, it's really exciting to have the chance to actually see this on a week in, week out basis here at Notre Dame, because you just don't see it that often. Do you have any concerns about Golden playing both ways potentially.
Yeah, I think the biggest concern would be, he did this at a high school level. Can he do it? Can he meet the physical demands that it will be at the college level? And again, it's not just any college level. We're talking about Notre Dame, who just went to a national championship, right? Like you have to be able to meet the physical demands on both sides of the ball. And again, going back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier, the conditioning aspect of it, you have to be physically trained, and you have to be, you're what's the word? Anaerobic, I guess, trained as well. Um, so that would be my biggest concern. Is it's one
You
thing
didn't have to try to get
school.
scientific there.
It's one thing to do it in high school, but
Yeah.
when you do it at a high level, at a big time program and big time games consistently.
No, I mean, that's exactly it. Like the fact that it is one thing to do it at the high school level, but it's another thing, as you move up a level. And like, look at Travis Hunter. He's going to try it in the NFL. And I guess my only concern, not only concern, but like as I rank,
Biggest?
is it, yeah, like the biggest concern is like it starts with development. Like, does he slow his development on one side of the ball where maybe he might, be better, have more impact, where, big, or where, where the team has a need, by trying to play both sides? Is he going to slow himself down on one side or the other because of the fact that he's focusing on two? Because, I mean, like in practice, there's only so much time in practice. And especially as a young guy coming in the door, there's so much, to kind of envelop yourself in, and, so much to try to absorb that you're trying to learn, both as a receiver and a defensive back, and like Travis Hunter, again, like he won a Heisman in his second year at Colorado, but he was a 5-star recruit who got to basically kind of have the run of the field in the year that he played at the FCS level at Jackson State. That was kind of like a warm up for him before they went on to Colorado, so like for an athlete of his caliber, a 5-star guy and the top recruit in the country, to, he was basically playing overblown scrimmages by getting the chance to do that at the FCS level before moving to the FBS level, in the first in the Pac-12 and then in the Big 12 at Colorado. So, there's a lot less on the line when you're doing it at Jackson State than there would be for Golden at Notre Dame, so like I think that I don't know, like is that overblown?
No, I don't think that's overblown. And I think another aspect of it, I think that you were getting into a little bit as well is, you still have to learn two college playbooks, one on defense and one on offense. And if there's one thing I know about Notre Dame's defense is it's probably a more challenging defense, right? Because Al Golden ran an NFL style defense. And they've said before that the defensive structure or scheme isn't really going to be changing too much. So, learning one position on one side of the ball is hard. Learning two positions and two playbooks, I have to imagine, is even harder. So, I mean, if it's something he's up to, then of course, like it's going to be, up to him to decide, can he actually do both? But I hope he's effective on one side of the ball, I guess is what it comes down to.
Well, and, again, like even though Travis Hunter got to do it starting off at the FCS level, I went back and looked. His freshman year, he was more a defense. He played more on defense. He played like 2.5 times more on defense than he did on offense. He played 253 total snaps as a freshman on the defensive side of the ball, just 87 on offense. And then basically that exploded the next year. And then the other thing is there is obviously an increased risk of injury, by
Right.
either overuse, and like he did have a foot injury his senior year, Golden did, in high school, and he's also 6 foot and 176 pounds. So he obviously needs to, to add an extra layer of armor, and that's going to come once you get to college, like in the weight program and all that stuff. But, like Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, and Carson Hobbs are all like right in the 190-pound range, plus or minus. So that's another 14 pounds or so that a guy like Golden needs to put on, especially I think playing, the defensive side of the ball to have that extra muscle. So you do like that is a concern, just the extra risk of injury by playing both sides of the ball. Couple of questions / comments here. Andrew says, would some of the veteran players who also played both ways in high school be jealous that they're letting him do this? I mean, I'm sure that.
No, I don't think so.
You don't think that would be a thing at all? I mean, I think the big thing is like this is something they talked about in the recruiting process. Like if there were other guys, who they were having these conversations with, I'm sure that they would give them opportunities as well. And, the biggest thing is like, are you good enough at your first job? Like the veterans specifically that I'm talking about. Are you good enough at your first job to even, have us consider letting you do a second job on the other side of the ball?
Yeah, I think really what's at play here is there's guys who are probably good enough in high school to get by on one side of the ball just because of pure athleticism, but
pure
there's
talent.
a difference.
Yeah,
there's a difference between when you get to college and you're truly talented on both sides of the ball. Like, are they, probably talented in some regards? Yeah, but they are really good at one side of the ball and just kind of average on the other. Right. This guy is legit on both sides of the ball. So if that were the case, that would be the case. And honestly, there's probably some guys who are like, man, I already got enough going on with playing one position. Like some people don't don't actually want to do that.
Especially like if you're a lineman, I can't see any lineman going, man, I need another 50 snaps a game on the other side of the ball. Right. I just can't see that happening. But I'm sure that there are probably some guys who would want to. But again, a lot of them are quarterbacks, just like, kind of like the cliche of the shortstop in high school, even though it's kind of changed a little bit because of the specialization with pitchers and stuff so much, even at a young age now. But the old cliche, it was, like the shortstop was the guy who did a little bit of everything. He could, he could play short, he could pitch, he was going to bat third or fourth for you or lead off, depending on how fast he was and that kind of stuff. But, there's only so much you can do as you move up a level. And I think he probably knows that as well. It's going to get harder to do it going from high school to college. But the fact that he has done so much and he's excelled in the way that he has in high school, again, just makes it a very, very intriguing, very exciting prospect to see it. But I guess the other side of this now as well is because of Travis Hunter's success, has he opened up a can of worms, by winning the Heisman, getting drafted number 2, by playing on both sides, or ultimately is this just a good thing for college football?
Yeah, I think it's both, to be honest with you. I think he has opened up a can of worms because more guys are going to be like, listen, I can do that too, right? I can be the next Travis Hunter. But at the same time, I do believe it is still good for college football because it brings kind of that level of excitement and what I would call kind of like the Shohei Ohtani effect right now with baseball. Like guys, it is very intriguing for guys to be dominant on both sides. It's rarely done. And so I think it's naturally good because of the excitement that it brings.
Yeah, I mean, there's a guy from Syracuse. I just talked to Brian Higgins, our Syracuse guest, earlier this week. He enrolled early in the spring. He was 16 when he enrolled at Syracuse this spring, turned 17 right before their spring game, and he's planning on playing both ways. Same deal, secondary, cornerback, and wide receiver as well. And I mean, I think it's great. Guys play both ways in high school all the time. Like, like we've talked about Drew Tranquil before, like you got to see up close and personal playing against Drew Tranquil when he was at Fort Wayne Carroll, the impact that he had on both sides of the ball. Obviously didn't play both sides once he got to Notre Dame. But it's, again, it's easier to do that when you're a great athlete like Travis Hunter. Obviously Deion Sanders did it as well because you're typically just the best athlete on the field, all the time. And it's harder when you get to college, but that's also what's cool about it because we very rarely have seen it. I thought it was just, just such a cool thing to see Travis Hunter be able to excel the way he did on both sides of the ball. So to see it like Hunter at a high level probably makes it look, that much easier than what it is. But I think it's going to be, great if more high level guys are able to do this. Paolo says he wouldn't say he was a great defensive back or wide receiver. What do you think of that?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Well, Paulo, it's up there on the screen. He said he won the Heisman being good on both sides of the ball, but I wouldn't say he was great as either a DB or a wide receiver.
I just have to disagree with that, because if you get drafted second overall, you're probably great at least one of those. And, I just don't think you get drafted second overall because you're a complete package of being average on two sides of the ball. Like, he didn't get drafted because he's average at wide receiver and he's average at DB, so he can play both. He got drafted because he's probably they view he's exceptionally good at one and really good at the other, so they're going to give him the opportunity to play both. Like, I just don't think you could say someone's average when they're the number 2 pick and they won the Heisman.
Yeah. I think he's a really good wide receiver. Watching him, I feel like he's a little bit better as a wide receiver, but like you watch his highlight reel when he's out there making the kind of interceptions, like you very rarely saw him get burned when he was playing defensive back. And you like when you look at the numbers that he had on both sides of the ball, they just pop on both sides. Like either one, the kind of numbers that he had, either one you would absolutely take if he was only playing one way. Like, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, he had over 1,200 yards, and Paulo says, but Jesse, what's your opinion?
Oh, I mean, my opinion is I think he's good.
I thought he gave it.
Yeah.
Maybe he's not great at either, but I think he is really, really good at both.
I think he's good enough to be effective in the NFL at either.
Yeah, I think so as well. But it's going to be interesting to see, like when you look at Notre Dame's secondary, it kind of feels like if Golden is able to get up to speed, and we've seen this before, like just from the defensive side of things, it feels like with the depth of that side of the ball compared to a depth at wide receiver right now, that maybe, that's his earlier ticket to get on the field is on the defensive side of the ball. When you look at the fact that you've got Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, Carson Hobbs had a good spring. But, I think there's going to be an opportunity, and we've seen, just like Leonard Moore, not an early enrollee, Benjamin Morrison, not an early enrollee, but they both managed to get on the field and give Notre Dame significant contributions as freshmen on that side of the ball. So feels like there might be a chance for him, early on over there. But again, it's just all going to depend on, kind of how things shake out over the course of the season and what kind of workload that he shows that he's able to do. I would doubt that we're going to see like highlight plays from Golden as a freshman walking in the door. But if he, if he's able to keep at it on both sides, I think that, again, like just the possibilities are pretty limitless for a talent like that, if he's able to make it work. So the Ringer published a list of the 26 best draft prospects for the 2026 NFL Draft. Incoming Notre Dame wide receiver Malachi Fields is one of the 26 players on the list. Here is what they say about Fields. Quote, if you created a wide receiver from scratch in the EA Sports College Football 25 video game, you'd make a guy with Fields' physical build, 6'4" and 220 pounds. The first clips I watched of him were as funny as they were intriguing because he looks like an edge rusher lined up as an outside receiver. His speed comes from his powerful strides instead of in short bursts, so there will be questions of whether Fields can separate early in his route when facing NFL defensive backs, but I don't imagine he'll have much problem physically handling tight coverage. He has a wide catch radius and can track the ball far outside of his body, even if defenders are right in his hip pocket. I do wonder about how diverse his route tree will be in the NFL because he doesn't snap off routes quickly or change his speeds very well, but he can be an explosive big play machine similar to DK Metcalf, end quote. And again, that is from the Ringers NFL writer, and they include Fields among their 26 best draft prospects for the 2026 NFL draft. So, Jesse, if that's the guy who Notre Dame is getting, what's that mean for the Irish this season?
So, first of all, I didn't even know that Malachi Fields was this kind of highly regarded. So, I think it's great that he's on this list, and that, you know, the outside perspective is how good he is. And I think that makes me more excited of the potential that he can add to the offense this season. And if it's true and he can play in this big frame, he can be a physical route runner. Like, when I think of that, I think of Michael Floyd. You know, he was kind of, it feels like that was a very similar build. And so you want a guy who can be complementary to what they have. And I feel like he could be a huge compliment to players like Faison, Jaden Greathouse, some of these other guys who aren't quite as big, but are more of the speedy and agile kind of guys, right? And so when you talk about an offense that needs to take a step forward in passing, and we all agree that that's what's ultimately going to take the offense to the next level, is developing a legit passing game, he has to be a key contribution in that formula, because he can be that more possession, you know, get the body in front, pick up some of those tough short yardage type situations. And then again, you have Greathouse, Faison, and quick, twitchy running backs who can play off of him, that do better in kind of the open space type situation. So if it's true, I think it's a great addition to the formula of what this offense, specifically the passing offense, could be.
Yeah, I mean, you know, to your point about like not knowing like all this about Malachi Fields, like I think we all felt like they were obviously getting a pretty good wide receiver from Virginia, but on Monday, maybe even Sunday, he shows up in that CBS Sports, you know, mock draft for next year, and they've got him as their number one wide receiver. And then you hear all these glowing things about him. But like the things that stood out to me, he has a wide catch radius, can track the ball far outside of his body. Even
good for a young quarterback.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm going to. Like, Notre Dame has not, like we were talking yesterday, they've got a million slot receivers, you know, guys who have done well in the slot. What they've been lacking is that consistent X receiver like this. And that's where, you know, Fields is going to jump in. And, you know, like the whole, you know, and they talk about, where was it in there? Fields can separate early in his route when facing there'll be questions of whether Fields can separate early in his route when facing NFL defensive backs, which is different from college, but it's always kind of a chicken and egg thing when you hear about receivers and separation. It's like, can they not get separation, or do they just not have a quarterback who's willing and able to get them the ball, you know, the way they need to get them the ball? Well, I'll say if, you know, in case anyone wants to take offense with talking about CJ Carr, but if CJ Carr's the guy, they've got a quarterback who can do that. That's what he does exceptionally well, you know, and like the ability to throw to a big guy like Malachi Fields, and the Fields' ability to go up and get the ball and play physically against smaller defensive backs and stuff like that. It's like you just kind of licking your chops at that prospect with a quarterback like Carr, who's willing and able to throw guys open the way that he is, you know. And we haven't seen that big classic X wide receiver here for a while. You know, you kind of got to go back to Chase Claypool and Miles Boykin since we've seen that, you know, guys who've done that consistently. So like it's pretty enticing, again, because of the fact that you've got so many of these, you know, like slot receivers and guys who have done other stuff, but then you have a guy like this, can be a real difference maker, it feels like, for Notre Dame's offense.
Yeah, and if it is Carr at quarterback or whoever, Kenny Minchie, he's just an ultimate kind of security blanket, man. Like, when you're that big and you need to get a quick slant or maybe a screen and get, you know, 5 tough yards, whatever it might be, like, I feel like he's the perfect guy to go to. And they are so stacked at kind of the slot position. And so you need a guy who can naturally, you know, it's like playing basketball and having like 5 point guards on the court. You need kind of those other style of wide receivers out there so everyone can work better in unison. I think that's the main thing I've been trying to get to is he if he can be effective, it should allow this passing offense to be in more unison, to be more dynamic, and they can attack you in multiple different ways.
DK says he'll be going up against NFL DBs in practice. Good point. Like you'll have some good, strong physical DBs that he'll be going up against, at least in training camp anyway. Like when you're doing more good on good. Once the season starts, you don't do quite as much of that. But I mean, Craig asked a legit point, question. If he's this good, why didn't he go in the draft this year? Like, would he have just gone like, I don't know if it's like the chance to come back, and because he is being projected as a first-round guy, it feels like if he's being projected as a first-round guy for next year, he might have gone by the second round this year. I realize there's still a big difference in money first round to second round, but it is a legit question, and I don't know. It is a good question. What do you think?
I mean, it is kind of a big risk because he's transferring to a school where a guy hasn't been a quarterback, like he's taking a risk knowing that this is his last season before going into the NFL. And the guy that's throwing him the ball has not played a full season at quarterback, let alone started even one game in college.
Exactly. Going back to Dallas Golden, Adam says, I want to see him return kicks. And that could be a way.
I think he's going to be a huge special teams guy in his freshman year.
You would think so. You would absolutely think so. And because he has done so much in high school, to put him back out there on kick returns and just the kind of athlete that he is, that could be a real chance for him to be a game breaker type guy as a true freshman. Craig says, there they are. He was talking about us. Sean should be broadcasting the actual Notre Dame games on NBC. No cap. What if I want to keep the cap on? Is it a no-go at that point? One more point on Fields. Again, I mentioned that mock draft that CBS had him in going in. Any concern for the hype that's on him before he ever arrives here at Notre Dame?
No, I think whatever he can provide to open up this passing game is going to be more than welcome by Notre Dame fans. I don't think that anyone's billing him up to be this, dominant takeover wide receiver. But when you look at his stats, his junior and senior year,
like they are now.
His junior and senior year, he had 800 yards and 5 touchdowns. I would take that production any day of the week. If he can bump up to like 1,000 and 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns, that's an excellent season. So, I wouldn't say like my expectations are through the roof, but looking at his stats and reading stuff like that, you hope that he has a very productive and probably more production than Bo Collins, obviously too, right? Because that's someone they brought in, and not that Bo Collins didn't live up to expectations, but you probably wanted a little bit more out of him. And I think Malachi Fields is kind of the bigger, faster, stronger version of Bo Collins. And again, he just reminds me, the reason why I think he fits so well is because he just reminds me of like a Notre Dame tight end, but he's playing wide receiver. And they have a lot of success of being able to get those kind of guys the ball. And so I hope that, Mike Denbrock can find ways to get him the ball. Like that's the other part of it. Notre Dame has to do their job scheming up things to properly incorporate him and get the production that they need.
But again, I think that with the quarterbacks that Notre Dame is going to have, that either one of those guys is more than capable of doing that. Especially, like the way Carr goes through his progressions, there's not a lot of missed reads or, not seeing the open guy and that kind of stuff. I'm not saying it's never happened, in the opportunities that we've got to see him, but it's a lot more.
He'll be excellent in the red zone too, guy. You can throw up, some fades, 50-50 balls, that kind of
like
stuff.
Him and Eli Raridan in the red zone. I mean, man. Werewolf asks, who is the backup center? Do they get a backup in the portal? No, they don't need to go get a center in the portal. Right now, I would say it's probably Sullivan Absher, based on the fact that we saw him do it in the blue gold game. And then Otting would probably be number 3, and Ashton Craig, obviously, if Craig comes back, Craig is, when Craig comes back, he's the number 1, and then Sullivan Absher is the number 2. So they're perfectly fine in terms of offensive linemen. That's the last position that they need to, be thinking about. And I don't think they're going to go get anybody in the spring portal at this point. So they are, they're more than solid. Absher, I think, is at least one of the top 7, if not top 8 offensive linemen that they have. And we'll probably see some good doses of him over the course of the season, kind of as a swing guy. So Irish running back Jeremiyah Love is in that Ringer top 26 list for the 26 draft as well. Here's what they say about Jeremiyah Love. Quote, the list of potential first-round running backs in the 2026 class may be just 2 names long, and Love is the best one. He might be special enough to garner Heisman consideration next season. Love is equal parts smooth and sudden as a runner, toggling between a one-cut style when he runs between the tackles and dynamic playmaking once he's in the open field. I also think Love has the potential to contribute as a receiver, but he hasn't been able to show it yet because of Notre Dame's scheme, end quote. So that, Jess, from the Ringer, is blank.
That from the Ringer is, I feel like, what I've been trying to capture in the last year or so. I think Jeremiyah Love is electric, and I think he is going to be a first-round running back. And ever since he broke that play against Tennessee State his freshman year and had that touchdown, I was like, this is just a different running back. This guy is something that I think Notre Dame has really never seen before in terms of explosive, game-changing back. I've never seen a guy who runs and cuts, and he just does everything at one speed, it feels like, and that's fast. Everything he does is fast. And I like that they talked about the one-cut style, because that's what he is. He is one cut and go, and if you're in his way, he's either going to run through you or he's going to jump over you, right? So he is a very fast, powerful, athletic guy, and I just think it's when you talk about him, you can't help but get fired up and excited about Notre Dame. And then you start talking about, okay, can they actually develop a passing game off of that, which would in turn theoretically help Jeremiah's Love game as well, because it'll free up the box even more. So I just think that there's even more to come from Jeremiyah Love, which is kind of crazy to think about because of how much he gave Notre Dame last season.
Yeah, he'll run over you, around you, or through you. He can do all 3 of those because of that one cut, because of the extra physicality, that he's gained since his freshman year. Everyone loves to play that run against Penn State on a loop. Interesting that they say that there's probably 2 running backs who would be first-round running backs, Jeremiyah Love being the number 1, Penn State's Nick Singleton, who Jaywan Sider, of course, just coached and recruited away from Notre Dame, is the other first-round running back that they have on their list. But I think, we've talked about Love this week a few different times, and we talked a couple of days ago about what a Heisman season would look like for Jeremiyah Love. And I was saying that it essentially just needs to be a highlight reel all year long, because I don't know that he's going to get to 2,000 rushing yards, and I don't think that he will, because of the fact that, as we talked about yesterday, Jadarian Price has a legitimate chance to be over 1,000 rushing yards himself this year. But what they say in this write-up about the potential to contribute as a receiver, we all know that, and we've all seen that, and he even, repped some specifically at wide receiver a few times in practice this spring. But I think, again, as it pertains to fully utilizing Jeremiyah Love, the weapon that is Jeremiyah Love, and also being able to take advantage of a guy like Jadarian Price's skill, and as we've talked about, more 21 type stuff. I think that one, if you get Jeremiyah Love the ball in space more as a receiver, you're saving hits that he's going to take. The hits that he's going to take as a receiver after catching the ball in space are not going to be nearly the same as when you hand him the ball and he's running through the line and, trying to plow through linebackers and that kind of stuff. So I think that, again, like you can utilize both of, the complementary aspects of Price and Love, and then even Aeneas Williams in some different circumstances as well, and also save the toll that you're going to put on Jeremiyah Love if you use him more as a receiver this year as well.
Yeah, I think that the pass catching ability has to come into play a little bit more.
Yeah.
This season.
Craig says not a fan of drafting a running back in the first round. I think it depends on the running back. Like a guy like I was not a fan of the Lions drafting Jahmyr Gibbs as high as they did 2 years ago, but I will just eat that because I was absolutely wrong on that. When you look at what Jahmyr Gibbs has done, for the Lions offense and how they've utilized him, like that's fully how Jeremiyah Love can be utilized both at Notre Dame this year and in the NFL once he ends up being drafted. So like run-of-the-mill running backs, no. But like a guy like Ashton Genty this year, Jahmyr Gibbs a couple of years ago, Jeremiyah Love going forward, those are the kind of backs that I would have no problem taking in the first round. What about you?
Yeah, when I'm looking at first-round running backs, I just look at overall speed, to be honest with you. Like someone and playmaking ability, like someone like Ezekiel Elliott who can come into the league as a rookie and just be totally dynamic and take over a game, right? Like that's the kind of running back I'm looking for. And I think that there's a clear difference between a guy who can, potentially develop and be a good running back, but there's guys who are just going to be great no matter where they go. And I know this might sound cliche to say, but like any offensive player in the first round, I'm okay taking as long as they are just like an elite dynamic playmaker,
Yes.
Like I don't care what position you play. If you have the ability to take over a game and completely be that guy, like Adrian Peterson, Ezekiel Elliott, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, like it doesn't matter what round you're taking in. Obviously, it's easy to say that in hindsight because you've seen what they've become. And I feel like it's easier to miss on a first round running back and wide receiver than it is to hit. But to me, that's again where you kind of like there's guys who are borderline. Should we be taking this guy in the first round? Mm-hmm. Those are going to be misses.
Yeah.
When there's just something staring you in the face and it's just like flashing, like this is the next, you could just see it. And so I think there's just kind of natural intuition with that kind of stuff.
Right. I have a bigger problem with Amari and Hampton in the first round than,
yeah,
Ashton Genty.
And I said that, I said if the Cowboys for some reason got Genty, he would be the guy to take at running back. And if he wasn't there was no other running back I wanted them to take in the first round.
Yep. Got a little Notre Dame men's basketball news today. According to John Rothstein of CBS and College Hoops Today, Notre Dame and Ohio State are finalizing a home-and-home series for the next 2 years in men's basketball. Scale of 1 to 10, how much does it move the needle for you?
I'm going to be honest, this moves the needle like a 6 out of 10 for me. I like the more regional matchups like Notre Dame versus IU, Purdue, Ohio State, maybe Michigan State. And so I like this for that reason, but I need Notre Dame men's basketball to be better overall before it really moves the needle for who they're playing. So really, I think I'm going to talk myself down to like a 4 out of 10 out of this, just because Notre Dame men's basketball has just not shown that they're there yet. And so it really doesn't matter who they're playing when they're not playing good basketball quite yet.
Yeah. And I mean, unless Micah Shrewsbury completely does a 180 from what Mike Bray did, like I wouldn't want a home and a home with Indiana because, we've talked about this before. Back in those days, you might be too young to remember this, but when Bray got here, Indiana was on the schedule and they were still playing home and homes before they did the Crossroads Classic. And what happened was you would have locals who are IU grads or just IU fans who live here in town who would buy season tickets just because they could go see IU play Notre Dame. And then, you walk into Purcell Pavilion, just the Joyce Center at that time, and it's 80% red inside. And Mike Bray was like, we're not doing this anymore, So, and it would be nice to maybe see a Purdue every now and then. But again, like the state of Purdue, as good as they have been the last several years, why do you want to get into that? It's the same reason that the Purdue women until the last couple of years didn't want to get into playing the Notre Dame women. It's like, well, you're just going to get trounced by doing that. But so I agree with what you're saying. But the other side of this is I give it a solid 6, just because traditionally the home non-conference schedule for Notre Dame has been so boring and so full, filled with the Merrimacks and Loyolas and whoever's of the world, that I do think that it's nice to have an actual marquee name, on the billboard, or on the marquee for Notre Dame to have those kind of home games. And when Ohio State comes here in 2 years, I'm sure Micah Shrewsbury is saying we're going to be up and firing and ready to go by then. The fact that they would be willing to do this deal, because the first game this upcoming season is going to be in Columbus, and it'll be in 2 years, the 2026-27 season, that Ohio State comes here to Notre Dame. So I'll give it a 6, but I agree. You got to get better. You got to be competitive. But I think it's pretty cool to actually have a nice brand name coming into Purcell Pavilion rather than just run-of-the-mill generic U type non-conference
regional brand as well.
Yeah. Fill in the blank. We talked last week about whether or not a men's college basketball player who's going to be a first-round NBA draft pick might ever turn down the draft to stay in school for a big bag of NIL cash like Olivia Miles did in the WNBA. Now, we thought it's very likely to ever happen on the men's side, but it's blank that just 106 players entered this year's NBA draft, a number that's drastically down from the record 363 who entered the draft 4 years ago before the NIL era began.
It's shocking, but it's not shocking, because I think that it's shocking how drastic it is. But when you take into consideration the new landscape of college sports, you kind of expected this to happen. I guess I just didn't expect it to nosedive off the cliff like this. So it is a bit of a surprise to me at the end of the day, but it makes sense, because actually I think I was watching something just the other day, maybe like a couple of days ago, and they were talking about this exact subject, which was cool because you and I talked about this, a couple of weeks ago or a week ago or so, and they ran the numbers, and it's basically, you get to around, pick 25 to 30 in the first round, and you do the math, and it's more money to stay in college by taking the NIL money. And so if you can, 1, get more money, 2, maybe finish your degree, which, I don't know how important that is to some people. And 3, you can get another year of development and potentially improve your draft stock even more.
Right.
Why would you not do this?
Exactly. And, again, like the fact that it's basically fallen off by 60% I guess, from 4 years ago to this year, 363 compared to 106. I think it's a really good sign for men's basketball, because like we've talked about the fact that like these guys in the mid majors are just going to migrate and transfer and go to the Power 4 schools for a chance to play, bigger and probably get more NIL opportunities as well. But I think that ultimately it's just better for the game of men's basketball to have more longevity with guys staying in college more, because the quality of games in men's college basketball has really decreased since one and done began. And, because the fact that you've got guys just jumping out so early, it's like 1 year and, so nobody's playing together for that long anymore. And if you've got NIL that can keep these guys, because, like you said, you get to 25 and that's where the money starts coming into play. Well, these 106 guys who are declared for the draft, obviously a very small percentage of them, like less than 50% or right around 50%, are actually going to get drafted. And nobody's guaranteed a roster spot once you get even low in the first round and into the second round. So you're much better off staying in school, developing, and I think the college game is going to benefit from it in the long run.
Oh, for sure. I think the college game is definitely going to reap the overall benefits. And I did the math, 71% reduction.
71%. There you go. Thank you. I was close. I thought it was 60s, but it's just eyeball. So with all the backlash from Bill Belichick's interview, the infamous interview with CBS last weekend while promoting his book, do you buy or sell? Any publicity is good publicity.
I buy it, and I especially buy it for Bill Belichick because, I mean, the guy is just kind of doing whatever to get his name spread around households right now. And he's dating a 25-year-old or however old she is. He's letting her run basically his public life, his social media, all that stuff. Like, it is very clear that Bill wants to be young, hip, and relevant. And so when you're trying to be young, hip, and relevant, it doesn't matter how your name is going around. If kids are making fun of you on TikTok or making memes about you, but
they're talking about you.
Yeah, they're talking about you, and everyone now knows Bill Belichick even more, which is, kind of hard to think about because he's one of the greatest all-time NFL coaches. But it just feels like this stage to him is kind of like his encore after the hard, rigorous career that he had in the NFL. It just feels like he's really kind of let the wall down a little bit, and he's no longer acting to be Mr. Tough Guy all the time. He's actually kind of showing you a side of him of like, I could be kind of fun and playful too. Like, I'm not just this, dick 24/7.
DK says, wake up. Naomi will soon be running your public life. Isn't she already?
No. Very funny.
Andrew says, not just sell, but hard sell. He would be shocked if he's still in Chapel Hill next spring. I don't know about that. Like, no. And I guess there's a difference between, what actually happens on the day job part of this and promoting a book, because I'm buying any publicity is good publicity, because I went on Amazon today and guess whose book is on the Amazon bestseller list as of right now? Bill Belichick's book that nobody has any idea what the book is actually about, but they know that Bill Belichick was promoting a book. It's like, oh, Belichick's got a book. Yeah. And he's got a bestseller now, which was his goal. And so while he's issuing statements, about who said what and, what he was promised. And, by the way, he said in his statement that CBS, that his publicist had a conversation, like, nothing was. I don't think any of this is what Bill Belichick is worried about the wrong things. Like he's worried that people weren't going to take his well, the theme of the book is leadership, and he's worried that people aren't going to be buying into that because of a little bit of talking about him and his girlfriend in the media this week. Like you said, all it's done is let people know, we're going on a week later at this point. We're 5 days out and people have been doing nothing but talking about it all week long. That is nothing but good for him. Now,
especially for someone who's selling a book.
Yeah. Well, and like Andrew says, the boosters who overruled Cunningham look silly. And I think it was not even just the boosters, but, either the president or the vice chancellor or whoever, he was hired by the higher ups in North Carolina. And I don't think any of this comes off looking bad on North Carolina's part of this.
My biggest thing was when he was going from NFL to college, I thought it would never happen because I thought Bill Belichick could never relate to college students. Do you want to know how he's relating to college students? He's dating a college student, basically.
Yeah.
That's
maintenance college,
she's basically
graduated college student, but
she is basically the liaison between Bill Belichick and him being around college kids and no longer grown men anymore.
Yeah. Now, have you heard the latest intrigue that's come with this from It's Bill Belichick's daughter-in-law, the wife of Belichick's son, Steve. Have you heard this? What's happened here in the last day or so?
I have not.
So, Rob Gronkowski and Julian Edelman have a podcast. They posted a clip of their podcast on Instagram where they say, well, basically, Jordan Hudson was just acting as a PR person during this interview. You know, they kind of made a couple comments along those lines. So, comedian Nikki Glazer, who hosted the Tom Brady roast, you might remember, or I guess she didn't host it, but she was one of the people who took part in the Brady roast last year. Nikki Glazer chimes in the Instagram comments and says 100% this. She's acting as his publicist. So it goes from Gronk and Edelman to Nikki Glazer, and then Belichick's daughter-in-law, the wife of his son, posts this as a reply to Nikki Glazer. Quote, publicists act in a professional manner and don't storm off set delaying an interview.
Ooh.
End quote.
Maybe Bill isn't happy in Happy Land right now.
Somebody's not happy in Happy Land. Bill might be happy in Happy Land, but the rest of the family might not be happy in Happy Land. So little family drama stirring up over this whole thing in public on Gronk and Edelman's thread on Instagram as a result of their podcast talking about this. I mean, there was no doubt that Gronk and Edelman were going to defend Belichick, though, right? Like,
right.
There was no way they were going to go against the family. All right. Draymond Green, Travis Kelce, and Micah Parsons are all examples of current players who have their own podcasts. There's a bit of a split on what people think about players who are still playing doing podcasts. Are you in or out on players doing podcasts, Jess?
I'm going to add, so like this is a question that has layers in my opinion. I'm almost in favor of banning podcasts during the season.
Ooh, okay. This has got to be related to Micah Parsons, right?
I mean, I just don't I just don't feel like it's a good look when, you know, you're maybe not performing as expected. You have a bad game. You start talking about
and that's where all the pushback. That's where all the pushback comes, right? Like nobody had a problem with Kyle Hamilton and the rest of those guys doing a podcast a few years ago because they were all playing well. But it's the minute you start going to the other side, the team loses a couple games, then all of a sudden everybody's got problems with everything. You know, it's like they think that you're going to be in the practice facility 24/7 trying to work it out until you start winning games again.
Right. And so it's like, well, why don't you spend less time podcasting and go figure out how to win some football games? Like, I just think you open up avenues for people to really critique you, and then it gets blown up on a much larger stage because you are Micah Parsons and you played for the Cowboys. You are Travis Kelce because you date Taylor Swift and you played for the Kansas City Chiefs and you've won a couple of Super Bowls. Like, all of that stuff is fair and in play, in my opinion. And so I don't think podcasting okay. If it were up to me, no podcasting during the season. If you had to have that podcast during the season, no in-game talk. We're not talking about anything football related. You can talk about, you know, maybe past football. You can talk about any other topic, but talking about the season that you're in while in that season.
But what else are you going to talk about, you know?
Yeah, but some of these guys get like Micah Parsons just gets on podcasts and like plays video games and stuff.
But he also puts a lot of other players on blast on his podcast.
Right. And that's what I mean. Like, I don't like that stuff because then you create bulletin board material, you create drama. Like, just play the game. And if you want to talk crap after the season in podcasts, that's fine. But I just feel like in season opens up so many more avenues for criticism. And I get it. They're grown men. They can do what they want, you know, that sort of thing. But I guarantee Bill Belichick 10 years ago wouldn't let Tom Brady do a podcast if he asked him. And there's a reason why they were really good. So that's where I'm at. I just think this whole podcast thing has become overblown too. It's just like, you're a professional athlete, you know, like let podcasters podcast.
Well,
the end of the day.
the other side of this, though, that I think Micah Parsons has alluded to, it turned out to be kind of ironic, I guess, that he retweeted something about Sterling or Shannon Sharp, being in line for getting, a big raise, and Parsons, said something to the effect of, "Yeah, Micah, give up the podcast," that kind of thing. But then within just a matter of days, the whole Sharp thing blew up, and he's not even on the air, and he's probably not going to get that raise now. But the bigger point is, like, by doing these podcasts, whether it's Draymond Green, Travis Kelce doing the podcast with his brother, they're working for something. They're starting their second career. They're building themselves up for their second career.
But Micah Parsons is still very much in his first career.
Right. I don't have as much a problem. I realize that it can definitely, stir things up. And like there was, like Parsons specifically when he left, like Tank Lawrence was saying stuff like, well, maybe if you weren't podcasting or something like that, we would have won more games and those kind of things. I definitely see where it can be, like an issue, for your teammates and stuff like that. But I don't have any big issue with it. I think that it's good entertainment, and it's, just like social media, it's another way for fans, to be able to actually not necessarily interact, but hear directly from the source, like guys they want to hear their thoughts on issues that are going on in real time. Like I do like the, like the Heights podcast set up better. Now, not everyone's going to have a brother that they can podcast with, but they are talking about things other than just football. Like they're bringing guests on and interviewing them and stuff like that. It's not all, like Draymond and Micah Parsons, just doing football and what's going on right now. So I don't have a problem with it. I get that people are going to react to it. Some people aren't going to like it, but that's basically everything. It doesn't matter what the topic is. Not everybody's going to like it. So we had a question from Indy for Life come in after the We In, We Out show yesterday. He slipped it in after the show was over. We In, We Out on paying $40 million plus for a championship roster. He says the Texas roster this year is supposedly going to surpass the $35 to $40 million mark.
I'm out on this. And the reason why I'm out on this, I don't think Notre Dame has to be a program that needs to shell out top dollar every year to put together a competitive roster. And I'll tell you why. I think this might be one of my quickest answers of the day. They just offer things that not many schools can. They offer the education. They offer the ability to graduate early. I mean, I know some of these other schools do that. They offer the opportunity for, people who have a profound, religious background. That's also a big part of this. Like I know Benjamin Morrison is someone who's deeply rooted in faith. Those kind of people, will gravitate to something like Notre Dame. Texas can't offer, those sort of things. And then I think you combine, who Marcus Freeman is as a head coach, who Marcus Freeman is as a man, and how the relationships that he establishes with these players. And then you look at the pedigree of players that have been drafted to the NFL and gone on not only to be drafted, but have really good all-pro, Hall of Fame, type of careers. So I think when you put all those things together, Notre Dame is the complete package outside of just a paycheck at the end of the day. There's just more for Notre Dame to offer that is, you can't really put a price tag on, but has a lot of value or a lot of valuation, especially later on in life, because we know that not a lot of players get drafted to the NFL, right? And so what are you going to do after the NFL? Does a degree from Texas hold more weight, or does a degree from Notre Dame hold more weight? Like what's going to get you a job and make you more money? So yeah, complete package.
That was your shortest answer of the day?
Oh, then I got really deep into it.
I'm out as well. I mean, I don't disagree with anything that you said. And the bottom line is Notre Dame's not going to just, hand out those big paychecks like that. You can come to Notre Dame And I don't know what the total would be in like what Notre Dame's roster would be getting when like if you added up what everyone is, able to take in NIL funds. But again, they're not just going to hand out blank checks and to bring guys in that way. You can come to Notre Dame, you're going to have plenty of NIL opportunities, and you're going to have a chance to make a lot of money in NIL, but they're not just going to, open up the checkbook and do it that way.
Another point that just came to me too is I think it's a reflection of character as well. Like, are you going to be, this quarterback from Tennessee who's just bouncing around because you want money? Or are you a guy who wants to get good at football and you're willing to, sacrifice a little bit to be a part of a team that can potentially win a championship, right? And so guys who are just consistently chasing money, I get it to a degree, but also it's kind of, again, like a flaw in character, in my opinion. Like, why do you have to be the guy who's got to make all this money in college, right? Bouncing around between schools. And I have no problem paying people. Don't get me wrong. Notre Dame's going to put together a nice, collective amount of money that they can divvy out to people. It's just they don't need to be the school that's paying people top dollar every year and their combined roster is top dollar because they just have more things that they can honestly offer.
Andrew says, why is it a bad thing to spend money on the players? Because Notre Dame will get that money back tenfold with a championship. Again, they're spending money. It's just a matter of how they're spending it. Right?
Yeah.
But Notre Dame doesn't want to be that team that's just saying, well, we're gonna be the team that offers the biggest money to get you here because of all those things that Jesse just mentioned that Notre Dame stands for and wants to stand for, other than just win at all costs. They want to win. They want to win badly, starting with the head coach and the athletic director on down, but it's not going to be in that fashion. I get what you're saying in terms of they'll get their money back, but again, I don't think you've got to cry for any of those guys, who are playing for Notre Dame. Like, they're making plenty of good NIL money. They're not going broke by any means. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Atlanta Braves mascot Blooper and the Philly Fanatic are going to have a 3-round boxing match before the Phillies Braves game on May 27th.
Yeah, I think this is electric. I think this is really good marketing, advertising, whatever you want to call it, by the MLB. I know I'm going to be watching. Unfortunately, this will be the undercard because the main event is me and DK going in the ring afterwards. So I hope he shows up.
This is fantastic, is what it is.
Isn't it? Like,
I would.
I'd pay to go watch it if it were closer.
3 rounds. Like, how many minutes are each round going to be? I can't imagine that.
Is someone's head gonna fly off? Are they gonna have to make sure they stay taped down? Because I want to see someone just get their head knocked off.
I know. I remember back when I was in college, we went to there's this famous bar in Stillwater, Oklahoma, like bar and grill. It's called Eskimo Joe's, and it was like a Friday night. It was either a Friday night or a Saturday night, and they had sumo suits, like sumo wrestling, like these big rubber suits. Have you ever done this?
I've seen it though.
Me and this other guy, we got inside the sumo suits and we were doing sumo wrestling, when you've got a couple beverages in you. That was interesting. But same thing with mascots. They need to do more of this. There aren't enough good mascots. 2, they need to do more of this kind of stuff. I am all in on
should they be doing this,
duking it out,
like the new 7th inning stretch? You sing the stretch and then they get one round of mascots just going at it.
I know. TD4ND says picks. I wish I had picks of that.
Does this become the new extra innings? The mascots just fight in a boxing match and to determine the winner?
Mascot battle royale, who you putting the odds on?
Or do you does one player get to dress up as the mascot so we get to see Aaron Judge fighting, Shohei Ohtani, just 2 giant people? I think that would be pretty funny.
I don't think the Dodgers would want Shohei out there
Yeah.
at this point, though. Time Cone says the Leprechaun would be the favorite over the Fanatic. It's always funny, like at the ACC basketball tournament, everyone brings their mascots out there, and all the other mascots from the ACC are in their costumes and stuff like that. And then it's just like a dude in a leprechaun outfit, for Notre Dame out there bouncing around with all these other cartoon-looking characters. It's pretty funny to see that because they'll do like different, kind of like they'll come out at halftime of a game and they're all like kind of out there bouncing around doing their thing and stuff like that. All right. Well, that is going to do it for today. Appreciate you being here. Good stuff as we ripped right through an hour plus of rapid fire on a Friday. Have a great weekend. Hopefully you've got good weather wherever you are. The spring is finally starting to show itself here in South Bend. You got any big plans for the weekend?
Gonna lay low. I think maybe try to get a little bit of golfing in. The forecast here is rain the next 5 days, so we'll see how that goes. But got a busy weekend next weekend with Mother's Day down in Columbus. My
Very
mom,
true.
grandma will be there. My sister will be there. I'll be there running around. So I'm saving all my energy for next weekend because we know how my mom and grandma operate in a confined space. And they're gonna be out of their element in a new city. My sister is gonna be there. So I'm ready for all the stress that's gonna be coming my way.
They work at their own pace, that's for sure. Yes. All right, hit the like button before you leave. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week on IB Nation Sports Talk.